Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning into episode 5 of the Launchpad. I can't believe how quickly these episodes are flying by. It seems like I just started the show last week, and we're already on episode 5. Last week, I hosted Ian Hartitz with PFF and Jacob Sanderson with Player Profiler, and we talked about some dynasty game theory, as well as some crowded wide receiver rooms and what to make out of them. Today, I'm joined with Andrew Erickson, who is also from PFF, and Brendan Tuma from Fantasy Pros, and we are talking about nothing except for this sophomore class. It seems like right now everybody wants to talk about the incoming rookies, but we got blessed with a 2020 rookie class that may have been one of the best we've seen in my lifetime, and everybody still wants to move on to 2021. We're going to rewind and revisit this 2020 class just a little bit, talk about some guys we might expect regression from, some guys that we could see take a further step forward. But before we get into that, let's start off with the introductions. Down at the bottom here, we've got Andrew Erickson. 2 weeks in a row that we got some PFF guys on here. But Andrew, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and what you are working on right now.
Got big shoes to fill coming in after Ian. Ian knows his stuff. So, but again, so my name is Andrew Erickson. I work over at PFF.com, full-time fantasy football analyst. I'm on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. I'm also now on TikTok, dabbling in some more video content. So my TikTok, I don't know the exact username, but the TikTok videos are on Twitter. So follow them there. And yeah, I mean, I've been at PFF for almost a year right now, and it's been a blast. It's been an honor, a privilege, I should say, to work full-time in the industry. And I'm just really excited to be on today.
Yeah, I mean, living the dream. That's what everybody's hoping for, is to get that full-time gig. So congratulations to you, Andrew. And it gets crazy nowadays. It's like you got to follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Clubhouse. And like the list just gets longer and longer and longer. Before we dive into the show, though, we got Brendan Tuma here. Brendan is a great friend of mine. When I was brand new in the industry, Brendan, you were one of the first people that I ever really made a connection with. And I don't even know if I've talked to you about this before, but when I started at Fantasy Pros, I was working with you, I was working with Zach Hanshu, I was working with Dan Harris, and all three of you were people that I really looked up to because, I was a Fantasy Pros user before I was working there, and you guys would help me out with all of the news coming through on Sunday morning. So I was very familiar with your name before we ever even had a chance to connect. But why don't you go ahead and let everyone know what you've got going on? I know you do a lot of behind the scenes work at Fantasy Pros, but let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and what you're working on as well.
Yes, sir. So unlike Andrew, just Twitter for me. It's at Too Much Tuma. I keep it nice and simple on there. I work for Fantasy Bros right now. I'm the news desk manager, is probably like the biggest thing I do. That's how we made the connection. So I'm in like the thick of the news as it comes in, year round, every day. And yeah, so that's how we originally made our connection. And I'm heavy baseball right now, actually, for most of my Fantasy Pros like out there work. But there is going to be some football stuff coming. As much as I am into fantasy baseball, I am just as addicted to fantasy football, and the content is going to be there this fall for me on that side of things as well. So I'm really excited that, you gave me the opportunity to come on today, and I'm looking forward to talking to you and Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, balancing one sport and doing that year round is hard enough. Brendan here does football, he does basketball, he does baseball, he does all of it. And being a part of that news desk is a really cool experience because it really kind of helps you just know what's happening day in and day out. You see all the news coming through that Slack channel. So I know it's been a huge benefit for me and really helped me kind of get my footing in the industry. But anyway, we've got a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and dive in. Like I said, last year's rookie class was absolutely loaded, and that's all we're going to focus on. So I want to start off with kind of a broad question here. And Andrew, we'll start with you on this one. Was the 2020 rookie class the most impressive class we have ever seen from a fantasy impact?
I do believe that is a correct statement. I think that this class, from a talent perspective, was basically loaded across a lot of different positions. I think the running back was really, really good last year, especially comparing it to this upcoming class in 2021. I think the running backs last year were just stacked with Edwards-Helaire. I mean, we're going to talk about all those guys today, but I think that those running backs were just a notch above some of the guys that we're getting this year. And speaking to the receivers, I mean, just immediate impact guys, players that stepped in from day one or the minute that they got a starting role and immediately produced on the field. And I think one thing to note about the last season in general, we had the most points scored ever. like most touchdowns, most offensive production. A crazy stat that I looked at was, from 2016 to 2019, only 6 teams posted at least a 30% touchdown rate. There were 9 teams that did it last year alone. So the numbers were off the charts. And that was a lot to do with the fact that the COVID impact, like there's no fans. Like that makes a huge difference with some of these players. And basically going into the year, it was like, what is going to be the bigger impact? Or is it going to be no crowd noise? Or is it going to be, okay, these teams haven't had to practice? And what ended up happening was, shocker, the talent rose, the cream rose to the top. It was the talented players that ultimately just, no, we don't need to practice. We don't need to build this. Just the best players ended up being super productive, which again, should always try to be something we keep in mind. I know we look at usage and do all this stuff, but again, you guys, talent at some point does matter. So that's what we saw last year. So again, yeah, I think that, yeah, for sure. I think the 2020 class was historic in that essence.
Yeah. And I think that, the storyline going into the year, the narrative was that this is going to be a huge advantage for the veterans that are going to be able to, call plays beforehand and all that. And then that happened. We saw Aaron Rodgers have a career year. We saw Tom Brady, rewind the clock and look incredible. But then we also saw the rookies come in and absolutely dominate. So, Brendan, I got the same question for you. Is there a class that you have ever seen that was as impressive as this 2020 rookie class?
I was just going to make that exact point you did, Dave, because that was such a popular offseason storyline last year was, are the rookies going to struggle? Is this year not to draft rookies in fantasy football? And then, as Andrew said, it did turn out to be, one of the best we've ever seen. So I think that's a good point that, scoring was up across the board. So maybe, that's part of the reason why this rookie class did so well. I don't think that can be ignored fully. But overall, as we're going to get into today, there's still a lot of reasons to be excited for this class, this year as well.
Yeah. So let's start with some of the quarterbacks because we saw, a few go in the first round. And I think the big 3 that we saw from last year were Joe Burrow, Tua, and Justin Herbert. So this isn't really fantasy related, but I just want to ask, who do you think is going to have, the best career out of these 3 guys? We got to see a pretty sizable taste from all of them. Obviously, Joe Burrow, his season was cut a little bit short. Tua was kind of in this weird timeshare with Fitzpatrick. And then Justin Herbert, he was the one that had the longest season and probably looked the best as a rookie. But Brendan, I'll start with you on this one. Who do you think is going to have the best career out of these 3 guys?
Yeah, so I do think it's hard to go against Herbert, just after what we saw and, recency bias and all that. But I am going to stick with Burrow for 2 reasons here. It's funny. I was down a PFF rabbit hole the other day, and Joe Burrow's just his passing grade on PFF, he ranked 19th out of 42 among qualified quarterbacks. And if you look at just Joe Burrow's passer rating on intermediate throws, which on a year-to-year basis has proven to be more sticky and a better indicator of true talent, then Burrow ranked 5th in that. So whereas, Herbert did really well under pressure and via the deep ball, those, that stat fluctuates more on a year-to-year basis. So for me, what that tells me is Burrow did really well on intermediate throws with a clean pocket and not so much overall. We know the Bengals O-line was a disaster last year. And so, hopefully that's going to be better in year 2. Hopefully Jamar Chase helps, but he was one of the best college prospects we ever saw coming into the league. And I'm just going to lean on that stat of him, which, as a lot of studies have shown, has been a good indicator of true talent.
Yeah, and I'd say just the eye test alone, Joe Burrow, he looked like he was struggling a little bit early on. You can tell that the NFL speed was a shocker for him. We saw a couple times where he would try to make a move and just get absolutely pummeled, and it took him some time to get up to speed. But I'd agree with you, but I want to get your take on this one, Andrew. Who do you think is going to have the best career out of these guys after what we saw from their rookie seasons?
Well, I had this great stat all queued up, but Brendan just stole it from me. I had the exact same one queued up. 5th best intermediate level. I guess I can add to it. So it was better than, or the top 5 were Mahomes, Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers. But Brendan, great stat, great usage of the PFF tool. You love to see it. But I agree with Joe Burrow as the sentiment. And I guess I'll look at it the other way. You mentioned Justin Herbert, and obviously he had the better year last year, taking home the Rookie of the Year. But when you look at what he did, his numbers are much more of a volatile nature. Again, he had a higher passer rating from under pressure than in a clean pocket. So that tells us, okay, he's making all these off-script plays. That's great. he has that ability, but that's not something that you want to bank on year over year. So it'll be interesting to see, okay, now he has a better offensive line. How is he going to now play within the confines or the confines of the actual play itself, where he's not kind of working off script? Like, how is he going to execute the actual offense that's, supposed to be, the actual play call? So I'm interested to see that, but I think that, long term, I think I'm still going to go with Joe Burrow. I like the weapons with the Bengals right now. I'm kind of iffy on the coaching staff there, but the same thing with the Chargers. I'm also kind of iffy on that as well. I think actually Tua probably has the best supporting system right now in terms of coaching established, but we'll see how things work out with the Chargers. But yeah, I'll go with Joe Burrow as well.
Yeah, I think looking at the three teams, I think that Tua probably has the best team around him right now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just surrounded with success, but long term, I don't think that's going to translate as well as just being a great player and that's what we saw from Joe Burrow. You made a little knock on the coaching staff here. Brendan and I, we can absolutely empathize with that. I can't tell you how many Joe Mixon updates we had to do last year. Well, Zach Taylor was just jerking us around seemingly every single day. It was terrible. I don't know if you saw the beat reporter from the Cincinnati Bengals, Ben Beatty, actually changed his name to Joe Mixon foot update during the season because that's all he was doing was updates on his foot. But all right, we knocked out the quarterbacks, and now this is where the real fun starts. I think is this running back class, because it is just absolutely loaded. Like when you look at consensus rankings right now, it's like almost half of the guys in the top 20 are guys that are coming into their second years in the league. I've never seen anything like this before. So let's focus on that, and let's start with Jonathan Taylor. Where do you have him ranked for 2021? And I'm wondering, do you expect him to regress? Do you expect him to take a step forward? Or do you think what we saw last year was kind of what we should expect going forward? Andrew, we'll start with this one just in case Brendan has the same stats lined up for as you.
Thank God that I get to go first. So I have Jonathan Taylor ranked as my running back 7. So he's in front of Nick Chubb, Cam Akers, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler to round out the top 12. And honestly, part of me thinks it's too high. And I was out on the front kind of with everybody else proclaiming Jonathan Taylor as this top 5 running back for fantasy. And it looked like a lock. It seemed like everything was kind of work. But when you kind of look at more of his situation and projecting him for the next season, I think from a talent standpoint, I don't think it's really up to debate. I think that he's really good running back. I mean, he was 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards last year. He was the RB3 over a long stretch of games towards the end of the season. He averaged 26.1 fantasy points per game. Again, but he also had like an easy schedule to end the year. And you also have Nyheim Hines. Okay, what's the pass catching going to look like? Look, Jonathan Taylor wasn't this proclaimed pass catcher coming into the season as a rookie. Like that was like a knock on his profile. It was like, oh, he's not really a pass catcher. And then he kind of like surprised us with the amount of pass catching he was actually able to do. But for me, I think that's really more of a direct link to Phillip Rivers. Like Phillip Rivers doesn't run at all. And so he throws to the running backs. It's the whole opposite effect of like Lamar Jackson and these other running quarterbacks that don't throw the ball to the running backs is because they can run. Phillip Rivers is the least mobile quarterback that there was last year. And now you're inserting Carson Wentz into the lineup, who he runs a little bit more than Phillip Rivers does. And if you look at Miles Sanders, some of his receiving numbers last year, they were really bad. Like part of it was on Sanders because he kept dropping the ball, but Wentz never looked comfortable throwing the ball to the running back position. So I think the pass catching, I think last year we kind of saw like a ceiling of Jonathan Taylor. I don't think that that's going to progress any forward. So really, I think the best way to look at Jonathan Taylor is kind of like Nick Chubb in an essence, like really good running back, like really good first and down guy. But I don't know if the pass catching is going to be there necessarily. And it's like, I think Mike Tagliere has really done a good job describing it. Is like, why would I draft Jonathan Taylor the first round when I can get Nick Chubb in the second round? Like, and it's like, you're right. Like I think that's pretty spot on. Like, what's the real difference? And I think that's a really good exercise to look at some of these second year running backs as we kind of go through them. It's like, is there another guy that has like the same profile that I can get around later? Like, does that player exist? And I think with Taylor, I think he's probably a little overrated right now. Again, if they were swapped and you could get Taylor at the end of the first round, beginning of the second, I think that I'd feel more comfortable about it. But I mean, this Colts offense it's okay, but I'm not like, oh yeah, the Colts, let's go. Like rocket emojis, like to the moon. Like I don't feel that way about the Colts. So I guess for Taylor, I guess I would say I'm more lukewarm than most.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Brennan, I'll throw the same question over for you. Where do you have Jonathan Taylor ranked, and are you expecting him to stay the same, regress, or improve heading into year two?
I'm kind of curious how the community would view Taylor if Phillip Rivers hadn't retired and was coming back, because that would just be like one more constant in Taylor's favor. I think the scariest thing about him right now is we don't know how the situation with Wentz is going to play out. Now, it's the same coaching staff. It's a lot of the same surrounding pieces. They did re-sign Marlon Mack. That doesn't, that doesn't scare me as much as, just Nyheim Hines' overall presence and, stealing targets in the passing game and not getting as many targets because Rivers isn't there. But the Wentz factor we just don't know exactly what it's going to look like, if the offense is going to be all that functional. Now, Taylor smashed down the stretch. Over his final 6 games, he averaged 139.5 yards and scored 8 touchdowns, like average that many yards. Like that is insane. He took advantage of a soft schedule just like David Montgomery did. But obviously, Taylor's a more talented back than Montgomery, and that's why we're higher on him for fantasy purpose going into this year. So I kind of view him more as like a volatile first-round pick in the sense of there are reasons to be concerned. It wouldn't surprise me if come the end of the season, we look back and think, okay, we got a little carried away with how that second half went during his rookie year. But it also wouldn't surprise me. Like you look at some of the names, I know it's like inconceivable to think, Kamara or Cook or Henry or some of those guys could take a step back, but his history says one of or two of them probably will at least. And Taylor is just at the age that he's at. He is on the ascent, so it also wouldn't surprise me if like this time next year he's the second or third overall pick. So I do think he's a little more volatile than some people are comfortable with drafting in the first round, but I do not want to end up too low on him just because of the concerns I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I think both of you really summed up kind of my feelings of Jonathan Taylor. At the end of the year, it's like everybody was just touting him as the dynasty running back one, and everyone was saying that put him above Kamara, put him above Christian McCaffrey, Saquon, and I felt like that was a little crazy at the time. And I feel like, we see this in stocks all the time where these stocks start to shoot up and then you see that big correction. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at with Jonathan Taylor right now. You can't deny his talent. You can't deny the fact that he's got the best offensive line in the league. I mean, you got a talented running back with a great offensive line. That alone makes you think that this guy should just crush it for the next few years. But yeah, Phillip Rivers being gone is going to be a big hit to his value. Marlon Mack being back, I feel like a lot of people are just ignoring that Marlon Mack was a very capable running back 2 years ago. So it'll be interesting to see how those shake out. But I agree with you guys. And I've got him sitting at RB8 right now. And somehow it feels both too high and too low at the same exact time. So he's definitely a polarizing guy. I think that he has a relatively safe floor. But, competing for carries with Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines and even Jordan Wilkins, he's going to get some looks. Definitely pushes his ceiling down just a little bit. Now, there was only one rookie running back that put up, or there was only one, the rookie running back that was directly behind Jonathan Taylor in scoring was James Robinson. And, he had the second best finish of any rookie running back. And then we all saw what happened on draft night. Jacksonville Jaguars went out, signed Travis Etienne, and just completely muddied up the waters in Jacksonville. So, Brendan, we'll start with you on this one. How are you expecting Etienne to affect James Robinson's value heading into next year?
So I was, more or less fading Robinson a bit even before the ETN pick. Just he has a new coaching staff coming in, and we don't know how that's going to play out. We know that he lived on volume last year and basically volume alone. Like he wasn't all that efficient. He's still an undrafted guy. I know, like a lot of people want to like James Robinson was an easy person to sell after the season because everyone loved him because anyone who had him basically got him for free. And then, he might have helped them win fantasy championships. So there was a lot of reasons to like him in that sense. But again, the new coaching staff can't be ignored. I'm starting to get a little worried about Urban Meyer just in, some of the quotes. He's, talking up getting Carlos Hyde touches. And we know that, he's got that connection to Hyde. And then the Travis Etienne pick and just even what he's doing with Etienne. Now, if Etienne is going to, do a lot more actual wide receiver work in this, what he wanted Kadarius Toney to be with that pick and the Percy Harvin role, Curtis Samuel role, then, that could open up opportunities for Robinson as well. But it's suddenly a crowded situation. I don't want to be overly high on the Jaguars this year. And, maybe, you talked about like that stock analogy where, we go up and down on these players. Now, maybe immediately after that ETN pick, we went way too low. It's not as if there's going to be weeks where like Robinson's unusable, but I struggle to see the path to a ceiling. There's just too many obstacles in the way. And I need to do an ADP check on where he's going. But my guess is that I'd rather be taking a wide receiver in that range because even if, let's say ETN gets hurt, then there's still Hyde. And if Hyde gets hurt, then there's still ETN. So I do struggle kind of to see that path to that ceiling in that range of the draft.
Yeah, man. Poor James Robinson. I want to get your take on this one, Andrew. How are you expecting this to shake out in Jacksonville? Nobody really knows, but what are you expecting?
I think that ETN's probably going to end up being the guy at some point. I don't believe that James Robinson is going to... I really don't think he's going to be that much of a fantasy contributor at all this year. I really don't think. I think at best case scenario, he's seeing touches in between the 20s, which, unless you're playing in a standard league, is pretty much useless at this point. The high value opportunities are what they're talking about with Travis Etienne. They're talking about giving him passes. And if you look at how he was used at Clemson, he saw the most carries inside the 5-yard line the last 3 seasons. Trevor Lawrence is his quarterback in Clemson and his quarterback in Jacksonville. He was comfortable with Lawrence. Those two were comfortable together at the goal line, the handoffs under center, running the read option, which Urban Meyer likes to do with his quarterbacks. It's going to be I would bet that it's going to be Etienne. It's going to be the goal line back. So for me, I don't care if Etienne's not getting 20 carries a game. He was never going to get that based on his college profile. He had 1 game with 20 carries since 2018. So if he's only seeing, 12 to 15 touches, maybe more like 9 to 12 to start, that's kind of what Curtis Samuel and Percy Harvin saw when they were playing in college with Urban Meyer. They're all going to be high value touches. So we're going to know what Etienne's going to give us week in and week out. But James Robinson's going to be, if he runs for an 80-yard touchdown, then I can start him. I don't like players, and this kind of Naheem's is kind of one of these guys that I don't know ever when to start them. They're going to end up in RB 35, RB 20 range or something like that. But if I never know when to start them, what's the point of having them at all?
Yeah, I think what James Robinson is going to make for is going to be a great DFS option in tournaments when you want to swing for the fences, because I think you hit it on the head. He's going to break off some big plays and do that every once in a while, but then he's going to have other weeks where he's going to see 12 touches for 40 yards, no receptions, no touchdowns, and then you're just going to be stuck with a dud in your lineup in fantasy. So I couldn't agree with you more that I think ETN is the guy that's going to command those premium targets. He's going to see the receiving work. He's going to see the goal line work, and that really spells trouble for James Robinson. So it's sad to see, because it was such a great story last year, coming in undrafted and just taking the league by storm and doing everything you need to do to secure a job, and then getting replaced on day 1 in the draft. I mean, it was tough to see, but I think that people that are still hoping James Robinson is going to be a low-end RB1, I think they're just fooling themselves at this point. I think his ceiling is pretty much that of a mid-tier RB2 at best. So let's get off to another one. So James Robinson was the number 2 scorer last year, but now when we're looking at consensus rankings, the number 2 sophomore running back is Cam Akers, who got off to a brutal start, went on a tear down the stretch. And like I said, now he's the number 2 guy in this talented group of running backs. So Andrew, start with you on this one. What are you projecting for Akers in 2022 or in 2021? Do you think that he's going to still get that crazy workload that we saw at the end of the season?
I'm pretty torn on Cam Akers, because right after the season ended, I was really upfront about Cam Akers. I really liked him a lot. I know there was a discussion about, Darrell Henderson. Is he going to be more involved? Comparing the workloads between the two. It's what's the difference? It looks like their production was basically the same. And I always sided on the side of Cam Akers, because, when he was healthy, he was the guy. He never saw lower than a 60% snap share in games when he was fully healthy. And neither Darrell Henderson nor Malcolm Brown ever saw more than a 62% snap share at all. Whether they were healthy, whether they were splitting time or whatever. So Akers was the guy when he was called upon. And that was something I attached myself to. But then Akers' value disappeared. There's no more value anymore in drafting him now that he's a consensus top 8 guy, top 10 guy. So I'm kind of torn because I thought I was kind of ahead of the curve, ahead of the market. Be like, oh, sick! Like I can get Cam Akers at the back or the beginning of the second round as my second pick. Pair him with another running back. It's like, no, like that's not the case anymore. So now I'm like less bullish on Akers because now I'm actually kind of considering more about, okay, well, what are the chances that Darrell Henderson is actually a little bit more involved? And, you know, how good is Cam Akers? You know, he didn't play that many games last year. So I'm not as excited as I once was because I thought that I was kind of leading the trail on Cam Akers, but then everybody kind of like jumped in front of me. So now I'm feeling like I'm going to have less of him. And looking just based on the other running backs that are available, I guess I'm okay with that. Like, I think that he's a good player, but at the same time, I mean, am I really going to take him over Aaron Jones? Like that just feels dumb. Like that feels really dumb to me that I'm going to have this ego about myself that no, I'm taking Cam Akers. He was my guy. Like, I don't care about Aaron Jones and the fact that he's been a top 5 running back the past 2 seasons. And like, if he has Aaron Rodgers, like nothing has basically changed about his outlook.
Right.
So I don't want to do that. I don't want to like get into like a take lock with Cam Akers and be like, no, he's my guy. It's like, well, he was my guy, but then more people liked him than I did. So
and
here I am.
I think that's a great point. And just like on a bigger picture thing, it's like people are so obsessed with like these new shiny toys that everybody wants. Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, all these guys, that it's gotten to the point where veteran running backs now are just a crazy value that you can get Aaron Jones and Ezekiel Elliott at the end of the first round. And going into the second round, you know, you could pick up Austin Eckler and Joe Mixon. And people are so obsessed with getting that like new young guy that they're forgetting that there are still a lot of really talented veteran backs that you can get for much, much cheaper. But Brendan, I'll throw the same question to you. Cam Akers, what are you expecting from him in 2021?
Yeah, so I think it was actually Ian who talked about on Twitter, like Taylor versus Akers. And he did, you know, as like he likes to joke around a bit, but he had some like truth to it as well. And I do think that's an interesting debate. And I think that this Rams offense is one that I haven't seen priced up to what its potential could be. And you know how we sometimes see some offenses where all the ADPs reflect best case scenario. And then there's also offenses where they reflect worst case scenario. The Rams feel about in the middle still to me outside of Akers because Sean McVay did slow things down a bit last year. And obviously we know that he lost faith in Jared Goff, especially down the stretch. But now that he has his guy, Matt Stafford, I'm curious if he like really revs that pace back up. And if he does, what that could mean for fantasy purposes. Over his final 6 games, Cam Akers averaged 23.8 touches per game, and now Malcolm Brown is gone, so that removes an obstacle. And I think with fantasy at this point, you know, some people might want to say like, oh, Darrell Henderson's still there. Well, like, that's okay. No one has an entire back. Maybe Christian McCaffrey has an entire backfield to himself, and that's it. Everyone else at least has someone. So you just want that someone to not be a player who can steal a lot of work. And I don't think Darrell Henderson is that guy. So I think Akers, you know, that late first round, early second, like that kind of makes sense. He does feel in the right range with, you know, Eckler and Chubb and, you know, Aaron Jones and some of these guys. And I can't say, you know, for certain who will, you know, finish ahead of them. It just feels like the right range. I would love for Akers to be one of my top 2 picks. And I do think there is a path at least to that. I mean, a lot of these running backs have this in the top 5. Or in the first round, but there's a path to top 5 production if this Rams offense if McVay has his best season as a coach and, you know, Stafford just, you know, really complements what he's trying to do, that this offense could reach, you know, 2017 Todd Gurley level with Akers.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, Sean McVay wants to run the ball. He gets this, you know, just because I feel like when people hear offensive guru, you know, they think that it's somebody that's going to be throwing the ball a lot, but Sean McVay's committed to the run, and Cam
both
Akers
him and Shanahan.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, he's considered you know, they're a run first team. So and if Akers is the guy there, I think that he can totally outkick his ADP right now. Now we talked about Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers both maybe being pushed a little bit above what their value should be. One guy that I think that is a screaming value right now, and he's kind of the consensus 3rd overall, is Antonio Gibson. Now, despite being a wide receiver in college, Antonio Gibson only saw 44 targets all year as a rookie. And that was pretty much the biggest knock on his value, is not being involved in the passing game. So, Brendan, we'll start with you on this one. Do you expect to see Antonio Gibson get a little bit more involved in the passing game this year?
Yeah, I mean that's really what the ultimate question comes down to for him, and I think he's going to be. I think what we lost in preseason last year is exactly what I'm going to be looking for in Antonio Gibson this summer in those preseason games. Is he staying on the field on third down, or is J.D. McKissic coming in? Is he getting targets? And we'll get practice reports and things like that as well. But that's like the type of relevant information that you can take away from preseason games. So right now it's just all speculation, and it's, who are any of us to say, what this coaching staff is going to do. I know they have the Panthers guys there, so there is the Christian McCaffrey connection if, everything breaks right. But, JD McKissick still being on the roster, like I really wish he wasn't, like, I'm not going to lie. And so Gibson, he also did have some touchdown, luck last year. He kind of overperformed. He had that monster. Was it Thanksgiving against the Cowboys? It might have been. He had that, like, maybe it was like a 3 touchdown game. So he needs that passing game work to kind of make up for that, overcorrection he had in the touchdown department last year. I'm kind of a hold right now until we get that. What I think is going to be the most important information about his 2021 outlook. And I don't think we're going to get that until training camp opens.
I mean, how frustrating is it to see a guy that was a receiver get turned into a running back and then see his backup running back see 110 targets while he saw just 44? I mean, just mind-numbingly frustrating last year. But what do you think, Andrew? Do you think that we're going to see an uptick in his passing game usage this year?
Seems like the next step. Like you said, the guy played receiver. He only had 33 college carries, and then he comes to the NFL, finishes as PFF's 5th highest graded rusher because he ranked number 5 in missed tackle rate, and he ranked number 1 in number 1 in stuff rate, which is basically looking at attempts that go for no gain or losses. So basically, he comes in, is like, yeah, I'm a receiver, and they're like, no, you're playing running back, and then he just becomes like a top 5 running back basically from some of these metrics, which is just nuts to think about. And this always happens. We think that we know, okay, well, I mean, everyone kind of wrote it, at least this is how I felt. It was like, Gibson, all right, well, we know he's at least going to get the pass game work because he played wide receiver. And then it's like, no, like, actually, we're going to just total reversal. Like, he's actually going to be this early down grinder, and we're going to play J.D. McKissic out and, catch all the passes. So I think that we will see him, though, get involved a little bit more. Maybe not to the extent of J.D. McKissic, where J.D. McKissic really was kind of like a pseudo wide receiver. I mean, he wasn't necessarily running a lot of stuff like out of the backfield. Like, he was lining up in the slot, like he was lining up out wide. Like, I just remember this pass. I think it's in my mind. It's like Alex Smith, like going deep to J.D. McKissic, like down the sideline. And I think that Heineke like threw a deep pass to McKissic in one of the games that they played together. So McKissic will probably still be involved, but I mean, I could even see Curtis Samuel kind of be eating into McKissic's role a little bit more. So I think it just seems like the natural progression that they involve him more. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, he got a significant uptick in work from year 1 to year 2 because Jonathan Taylor was still in the fold, or not. Yeah, not Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Stewart, excuse me. Yep. Jonathan Stewart was still in the fold during Christian McCaffrey's rookie year in Carolina. So I think it makes sense that we can probably project Gibson for an uptick in pass game use. I know I did a study at PFF looking at second-year running backs, and you usually do see a percentage bump from year 1 to year 2, just pretty like naturally, like across the board. But it also kind of depends on how much you saw in your rookie season. But I think that we will see a bump. Maybe he's not someone that we necessarily define as, oh, well, he's like a PPR back, but I think that it'll be there, which will always kind of give him a weekly floor.
Yeah, I love that Christian McCaffrey comp too. I mean, it's a spicy one, but they really have such a similar skill set. I would love to see Antonio Gibson take that step forward. And like I said, when you're looking at where these guys are getting drafted, pretty much everyone we've discussed so far, I think that Antonio Gibson is the best value and also has one of the highest ceilings. Like we already saw that he can run the heck out of the ball, that he's great at nosing out the end zone. And if he can get involved in the passing game, he's got one of the highest ceilings out there. But another guy that wasn't utilized in the passing game at all last year was J.K. Dobbins. And frankly, I don't expect that to change at all. I think that he is still going to remain a run guy. They just don't check down to running backs. It's not in Baltimore's playbook at all. So considering that he is probably going to be a pretty low reception guy, what would you say his kind of ceiling is? Like what's the best finish that we can expect from J.K. Dobbins? Andrew, why don't you start us off?
Low end RB1 status. Look, the guy finished week 11 onward in the games that he played. He was the RB11 in terms of fantasy points per game. You know who the RB10 was? J.D. McKissick. We just talked about him because J.D. McKissick catches passes and J.K. Dobbins doesn't. J.D. McKissick caught 37 passes from week 11 onward. Dobbins caught three freaking passes. And he was scoring touchdowns like every single week.
Week 11 onward, 3 catches?
Yes.
I knew it was low. I didn't know it was that low. Oh my God.
He had more catches. He had more catches in the playoffs because the Ravens were behind in more games. So, yeah, that's my thing with Dobbins. It's like, I can't take him over Chris Carson. Just can't do it. It's like, why would I do it? Chris Carson is a workhorse. He's a legit running back. He gets hurt a lot, but when if I know they're going to play the same amount of games or whatever, I'm taking Chris Carson, who goes after J.K. Dobbins. And look, you look at J.K. Dobbins' numbers, 6 yards or 6 yards per attempt. Even though yards per attempt has proven to have been like the worst predictive stat, people still throw it out as, okay, yeah, no, it's a summary of what he did last year. Okay, good. We know he's good to run with Lamar Jackson. So is Gus Edwards. If you look at all the other rushing metrics, Gus Edwards was better PFF rushing grade, better yards after contact grade, more forced missed tackles than J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins just had a higher yards per attempt because he had more big runs, which again is not a sustainable stat year over year. So for me, he's fine. Like, he's a good running back, but there are other running backs that I think just have way more upside. And like I said, like last year at the end, the tail end of the year, he was scoring touchdowns every single week. And like, that was kind of his ceiling. And it was still worse than J.D. McKissick because he didn't catch any passes and he would finish as the RB11. So again, like his ADP's RB17. So it's not like egregious. Like, I think he's priced pretty appropriately. I think he's still a little overvalued, but I don't think that we're going to be looking back at Dobbins and being like, oh, like he was a league winner. Like, I don't think that is in his range of outcomes.
Well, first of all, before we go over to Brendan, I just want to thank you for the Chris Carson love. Chris Carson is a guy that I'm extremely bullish on.
So underrated. So underrated.
He is. I'm looking at Football Guys right now, which is where I post my rankings, and I have him higher than everybody else on the website. I have him sitting at RB12. For some reason, this guy just still doesn't get the respect. And you said it. He is a workhorse. He's in the passing game. He's the goal line back, and he's on a powerhouse offense. So we'll go back to J.K. Dobbins, but just wanted to plug Chris Carson there. Love that guy. Still, for some reason, people are still worried about Rashad Penny, the fumbling, the injuries, whatever. I don't care. When that guy plays, he is in RB1. All right, Brendan, what is the ceiling that you can see for J.K. Dobbins? We know that he's talented, but given his limited usage in the passing game, what would you say his ceiling is next year?
Yeah, Andrew pointed out, a great stat about from week 11 on. I have another stat here from week 8 on. Dobbins and Edwards, so the two of them combined, averaged 2.2 targets per game. So like just more fuel to the fire about Baltimore not throwing to their running backs. Like, that really is alarming. And this is a bit of an obvious statement, but Dobbins has the least amount of value in full PPR leagues. And then, it goes down as you go to half PPR, it goes up as you go to half PPR. And, there are still some people who play in standard leagues. So in standard leagues, you can stomach that a little bit more. But for him to have fantasy success this year, then, yeah, it's going to need to be a very high level of efficiency. So like Nick Chubb is someone who we've already talked about on the show, who's, a great inside runner. And that's what it's going to take from Dobbins. He's going to need to maintain that efficiency that Andrew highlighted, and then he's going to still need to score those touchdowns. Now, that's not ordinarily something you want to bet on, especially for me in round 3 of the draft, when there are still some stud wide receivers, or maybe you can get Waller or Kittle there. So I think for me, the way I'm going to play the Ravens backfield, because I do kind of want a piece of this pie, but the last I checked for, my ADP sources, Dobbins was about a 3rd round pick and Gus Edwards was like a 7th round pick. I will just take Gus Edwards I'd rather take Gus Edwards in the 7th than Dobbins in the 3rd. And that's how, I plan, as long as that holds and Edwards' price doesn't get out of control on its own. That's how I plan to play the Baltimore backfield.
Yeah, could not agree with you more. When you're looking at this timeshare, I think that they both, Gus Edwards gets a lot of goal line work too. So I'm much more happy spending a 7th round pick on Gus Edwards than I would be coughing up a late 2nd or an early 3rd on J.K. Dobbins. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about, we got some fresh news today, and, there's nothing official here, but, Adrian Peterson, or not, I'm sorry, not Adrian Peterson, that was last year. Todd Gurley was brought in to work out with the Detroit Lions today. Nothing is official. He hasn't signed yet, but he was kind of this fantasy darling to end the year. He got off to a really hot start, and then everyone was saying that, his usage in the passing game kind of the antithesis to J.K. Dobbins, that his usage in the passing game was starting to push him up rankings. But now we've got Jamal Williams there. We've got Todd Gurley working out with the team. So what are we supposed to expect from Swift in 2021? Brendan, start us off here, because I feel like this is just such a convoluted question. There's so much happening in Detroit that it's tough to really gauge.
Yeah, so we were just offline before we started the show talking a bit about the situation. I know you had some things to say about the Lions. I don't know how much your Bears fandom played into that, but I think it did a little bit. But Swift, I think as a talent, again, this is where kind of like, we need to separate what we think about talent and situation, because I love Swift as a talent. I think he's, very exciting. Some of his highlight tapes, again, not to make the show all about Ian, but some of those like highlight tapes that he puts up on Twitter, I just watch it and I fall in love with Swift, and it makes me want to draft him. And then we had that quote about Jamal Williams being, what do you call him? The A-back. And not that means like everything, but it's just like something that, they went out and they signed Jamal Williams, and it was a 2-year deal, and they do really like him. And now the Gurley visiting, and there was already questions about how good this offense would be, because we know that high level fantasy running backs typically come from good offenses. We know that. And I don't know what we can expect of this Lions offense, of how good it could be. All that being said, Swift did average 4.4 targets as a rookie. And that's despite not, becoming close to a full-time player until the second half of the year. So I love Swift as a talent. It's going to be really hard to stomach. You can just, envision the scenario. It's week 5, week 6, and we're clamoring, why aren't they giving him enough touches? The only other note I'll add on Swift is that, I'm more into him in Dynasty, where, talent tends to win out more so in the long run than being confined and tied to Swift for just this redraft season.
And I agree with that. And anyone that follows me on Twitter knows that, I'm not a Swift hater. Swift was my number 1 running back coming into the draft. It was when he landed on the Lions that I was just like, well, here it goes again. How many times have we seen fantastic prospects coming out of college go to Detroit? And then that's just like where running back prospects go to die. I mean, it's terrible to see. So, and everybody that follows me sees me with these like content where I'm just throwing stats out there that are just trying to push him down the rankings a little bit. And I feel like now where he's being ranked is a little bit fairer than what we saw at the end of the season. When the season ended, everybody was saying, well, not everybody, but there were a lot of people out there saying that Swift was going to have a top 5 year. Everyone was saying that if you didn't have him ranked as an RB1, you were crazy. And I think that we've started to kind of see a correction with his ranking as well. I think a high-end RB2 is, kind of what to expect, but people that are expecting a top 3, top 5 finish out of DeAndre Swift, that's not something that I can see happen, and I'm not falling for the trap of falling in love with another Detroit Lions running back. But Andrew, I want to get your take on this one. How are you feeling about DeAndre Swift next year?
I don't feel great, and it sucks because, again, the guy's really talented, but I think that's the issue. I think that people are latching on to the talent and really like not overlooking, like, okay, like zoom out. You want the running back who's probably only going to catch passes on the Detroit Lions, who are, I think, the 30th in terms of projected win totals next year, who are now potentially signing Todd Gurley, who literally can only do one thing, and that's run the ball into the end zone. And you want to draft the running back on that team in the second round? Like, oh no, that's my issue. I guess that's my issue with Swift. Like, he can be this awesome guy, like super great pass catcher, like do all these things, but this team's like, it's not a hot take to say, oh, the Lions are going to be bad next year. Like, I think we can all agree. I think everyone could agree that they're going to probably be a bottom 5 offense. And I know the fact of the garbage time thing. It's like, oh, well, they'll be down like 1 million points. Like, oh, he'll just like rack up like 10 catches in the fourth quarter. It's like, that just doesn't happen as frequently as you'd all like to think. It just doesn't. It doesn't happen that way. So yes, could those games happen? For sure. But he's going to be so reliant on catching passes, I think. And like, his range of outcomes is pretty wide. Like, could he ended up being like, I don't want to say like Nyheim Hines, but like, what if he ends up in a role where it's really like, he's really just running routes. Like, he's seeing like 2 to 3 carries a game, like not even really involved, because now they want Jamal Williams to really be like what are the odds that Jamal Williams just has more rushing attempts than Swift? Like 50-50. Like, I mean, the coach literally just said that he wants Jamal Williams to like be like the early down guy. So yeah, there's a lot of concerns about Swift. And I think that you are spot on by saying that his price has dipped. So as long as it kind of continues to match the news we're getting, I think that it's still fair to kind of take him. But I mean, I think the upside's just going to be generally capped anyway because of the offense he plays in.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And everyone's saying that his passing upside is what gives him a safe floor, but I don't see it. And when we hear this garbage time, when we hear about these guys that rack up garbage time, a lot of times, the guys that I think of are Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson. I don't think of Jared Goff racking up, 300 yards after halftime. And, I just don't see it happening with this team. I think that they're a team that realistically could end up scoring between 12 and 15 points per game on the entire season. So you're hoping that 50% of the touchdowns are going to break his way just to, maintain some fantasy relevance. So I'm with you. I think that he's a crazy talented player. And if you can get him for a good price in Dynasty, hold on, because talent usually does rise to the top in Dynasty. But his outlook in 2021 is a bit scary for me. All right. This is just crazy to think about how many great running backs came into the league last year, because we still have two more to talk about. And we're going to go to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I was completely off on Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year. I wasn't that crazy about him before the draft. He landed in Kansas City, and then everybody started going goo goo gaga over him. And I don't think it's crazy to say that he did not live up to his first round price tag. But now, heading into his sophomore year, he is getting drafted in the 3rd round, and I see that as a pretty fair value. Andrew, let's start with you. How are you feeling about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Do you think that this 3rd round price tag is enough for you to want to go out and get him next year?
Yeah, I think that is the fair price tag. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb. So, okay, Cam Akers versus Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So what's the difference really? So we got two really high-powered offenses. Okay, check. You've got the pass catching ability. Okay, check. You have RB1 potential. Okay, what was Clyde Edwards-Helaire through the first 6 weeks of the season? An RB1, top 11 guy. He was 2nd in the league in rushing yards. Versus Akers, who just did it on the back end. So that's the thing that I'm trying to, because as much as we talk about players and do the analysis on players, this is a game. And if you know the ins and outs of the game, that's how you win. And that's why people that don't invest as much time into the actual player analysis and just actually do more game theory, those people win more because they don't do dumb things like overreach on players because they're pounding the table on a certain guy that they need to have no matter what. That's such a bad mentality. No, I need to have this player no matter what, don't care. It's okay, well, that's dumb. You need to be a smart drafter. Really think about it. It's is it really smart to take Cam Akers 105? I did that in a best ball draft because I was I'm going all in. I want this Ram. And then I just look back and was I'm an idiot. Why did I just do that? That was really dumb. So I think you look at Edwards-Helaire and you're just dude, this is amazing value in the 3rd round. We were so high on him last year, put him in the top 5 or whatever. Sounds kind of like Cam Akers a little bit, but I think what's their range of outcomes? I think it's pretty similar, but with such less risk involved with CEH. I guess that's kind of the comparison I look at the two. And for me, it's the offenses are both going to be good. Edwards-Helaire put up RB1 production when he got the touches. They don't have Le'Veon Bell anymore. They brought in Jerick McKinnon. Look, I played Jerick McKinnon plenty of times last year to realize that guy can't friggin' stay on the field at all. So, I mean, so I'm not really concerned. I mean, Darrell Williams, okay. Who's better, Darrell Williams or Darrell Henderson? It's probably Darrell Henderson. So, yeah, I like Edwards-Helaire a lot. I think that he has bounced back written all over him.
Yeah, I think that he is arguably the best running back value right now in drafts, not even just out of the sophomore class, just overall. I think that he is one of the best values you can get right now. Brendan, what are you thinking? How are you feeling about this 3rd round price tag? And it's a high 3rd round, maybe even late 2nd round, but how are you feeling about Clyde Edwards-Helaire on his year 2?
So to Andrew's point about, just game theory and taking a step back and thinking it's simple. I mean, this is a player who has, another chance to be a featured back on the best offense in the league. And that's you can just say that, it's the most important position in fantasy football, and he plays on the best offense. And that alone, could break it down. Admittedly, I have been a Clyde guy, ever since they made that draft pick in Dynasty. I was aggressively trying to, get up to the 1.01 in rookie draft. So I could have him. So I am invested, but I do view this objectively, of course, as we always should. And, I'm aligned with you guys on the sense of a bounce back. And to the opposite of James Robinson, where James Robinson came out of nowhere last year and, made a lot of people happy. Clyde Edwards-Helaire made a lot of people upset last year if they use a first round pick and redraft on him. And, for a lot of people who play, in your home leagues and stuff, there's that line of thinking is just going to be out there. Oh, Clyde sucks. And they're not going to take him in one of the first 2 rounds. So I do think that creates a buying opportunity. You should never, ever, if a player burns you once, you shouldn't write them off. Every year is different. Every week is different. Just that whole mentality. So again, yeah, Le'Veon Bell's gone. They didn't, attempt to re-sign Damian Williams. And he is also due for a little bit more touchdown luck. And I think that first game, opening night last year against the Texans, was so tilting because he had that one amazing 20-yard run, and then he couldn't get in the goal line.
Yeah.
And again, maybe Andrew has a PFF stat that can tell us something about it, whether it's that's an actual thing or not. But I just think from that game aside, even over the course of the full year, it did feel like he got stuffed every time. I'm going to bet that doesn't continue. So I think he's a candidate for positive touchdown regression as well.
So I think what they refer to that at PFF is a sheesh alert is what I've heard Ian say. But yeah, you talk about it, with the home leagues and some of these casual leagues. I think that's where you want to go out and target Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because I feel like that was David Johnson last year. David Johnson had burned so many casual players that they just had this big X over David Johnson. They were never going to book him. And when you look at it, he had all the opportunity last year, and on a per number or a per game basis, he finishes a low end RB1. And he was one of those guys where he's burned so many people in the past that they didn't want him. And I feel like people still have that emotional response when it comes to Clyde Edwards-Helaire next year. One more running back to talk about. And this guy, you've got to scroll way down on the rankings to find him. You're not going to find him up there with the rest of the guys that we talked about. This is another guy that I think is a pretty good value. So let's wrap up with the running back talk with Zach Moss. After an extremely disappointing rookie campaign, the Bills ignored the running back position in free agency and in the draft. Do you see this as a sign that they are committed to Zach Moss to be the team's RB1 next year? Brendan, what do you think?
So I am pretty out on Zach Moss just in general, just because I don't see the path to the upside. Again, talking about that with James Robinson, because we know what the Bills want to do. As long I don't have reason right now to think that the Bills are going to do anything differently than they did last year, because they have the same offensive coordinator, the same quarterback, the same coach, the same skill players for the most part. So I do think it's going to be a lot of pass. Now, the one situation where I could see myself, and Josh Allen, we know that he can steal some goal line looks. And, Zach Moss kind of morphed into that goal line / third down back, where Singletary is more between the 20s and all that. So the one scenario where I can see myself being interested in Zach Moss is if I am going full zero RB. And, come, the later rounds, I just want someone I can plug in there who's going to get some touches, who might get some of the money touches, again, goal line and pass game work. But, other than that, again, it's just even if Singletary goes down, that would obviously increase Moss's value to the point where I'd consider him an RB2, but I just kind of fail to see that true upside. So it's not someone I'm overly excited about. He's still very useful in fantasy football. And it's a little, game theory, draft strategy specific for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Andrew, what are you thinking about Zach Moss? Are you back on the train, or are you off on Moss too?
I am firmly back on the Zach Moss train. Here's my spiel on Zach Moss. So again, kind of doing a zoom out of this offense, Buffalo Bills offense, one of the top offenses in the league, probably top 5 offense. Again, like you said, bringing back all the same coaches, same offensive personnel. This team's going to score a lot of fantasy points. Just in general, a lot of regular points. We want our running backs attached to high-scoring offenses. So he checks off that box for me. I do think that he's the guy that they want to be their lead back. I think Devin Singletary has shown that he's really not someone that you can rely on to handle a 3-down workload. I mean, when he kind of got the chance last year when Moss was hurt, it's like he didn't really do much. They kind of almost went away from him and didn't run the ball at all. So maybe the reason they were so pass heavy was because they didn't have Zach Moss. So again, trying to kind of think a little bit more, but he missed 9 games last year. So that's a pretty large sample size of where they only had Devin Singletary to rely on. It's like this isn't our guy. We didn't want Devin Singletary to be the main running back. He's a complementary piece. And the goal line carries is obviously a huge thing. Josh Allen has scored over 8 rushing touchdowns per season. And again, Moss is basically useless if he doesn't care any rushing touchdowns. But in the games where Moss was healthy, he led the team in carries inside the 5-yard line. So he had more than Josh Allen and all the other running backs combined. So I think that's at least an indication that he could have more chances for scoring if this offense is really good next year, which is, I assume that it will be. So I like Zach Moss in that type of aspect. And also he's really cheap. Like he's probably like the last running back that I would consider drafting like in a best ball format before it kind of like basically falls off a cliff. And you're just like, I don't know, like you're just taking dart throws on players. You're like hoping for injuries. It's like, oh, well, he's one injury away. It's like, oh yeah, him and like 30 other running backs are one injury away. So Moss price also, I think, is really a good factor because he's really cheap. One thing I will say about him in terms of like a redraft league is the Bills' schedule. The opening schedule sucks for running backs. So they open with Pittsburgh, Miami, and the football team. So top 13 run defense grade. So again, Moss probably isn't someone that you need to draft, but can trade for after he sucks against Pittsburgh, sucks against Miami because he has Houston week 4, Kansas City, and Titans. So bad run defenses. So again, right now it's May, so we're not necessarily doing redraft leagues, but just kind of something to keep in mind. In best ball, again, it doesn't necessarily matter as much, but yeah, I'm more optimistic on Zach Moss than most.
When I was doing best ball leagues to start, I was pretty much like 3 out of my first 4 picks were always a running back. And then I realized that Zach Moss was sitting there in the 7th round every single time. And I was like, wait, I could take another wide receiver early because I could wait till the 7th and get Zach Moss every single time. And a lot of my best ball season is going to lie in the hands of Zach Moss this year because of that. But yeah, I'm with you. You know, the fact that they didn't address any other or that running back position, you know, everybody thought that they were going to go out and get Kenyon Drake or Aaron Jones or Chris Carson, and they didn't. So that leads me to believe that Zach Moss is still going to be the guy. And when he was healthy last year, he averaged at least 1 carry inside the 5 every single game, which is just incredible. It shows that they want him to be the guy. Granted, he only turned those 8 touches into 2 touchdowns, but you know, you got to hope for some positive regression next year.
Positive regression. You always got to hope for it.
So we went through all the running backs. I don't have a whole lot set up for wide receivers, but I got 4 questions if you guys wanted to run through those. If you guys got to go after the hour, I totally understand. You want to hit these wide receivers though?
Let's hit them.
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
Let's do it. The first one, I'll throw this up here as a banner because it's a little bit confusing. Trade, keep, cut. Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins. For 2021, all 3 of these guys are ranked pretty similarly. So let's start with you on this one, Andrew. Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins. You've got to trade one, keep one, and cut one. What are you doing?
I love these because they sometimes don't make any sense, but you have to provide context. So I'm going to keep CeeDee Lamb. He's my highest ranked of the 3. I think that he has, I mean, it's really like, I think it's a 1A, 1B situation in Dallas with him and Amari Cooper. I mean, I think they're ranked basically next to each other across consensus rankings. And even I'm struggling to kind of figure out like, you know, one day I like Cooper more, one day I like Lamb more. So I just like his situation with Dak Prescott. I mean, he was a monster during the beginning of last year. So I'm going to keep Lamb. I'm going to trade Brandon Ayuk. And again, the trade and cut thing is always kind of different because you're getting rid of both players. But I want to trade Ayuk because I think he has the most value. I think I can get more back for Ayuk than T. Higgins because, you know, Jamar Chase landing has kind of gotten people off T. Higgins. I think that Jamar Chase is really more of a tide that lifts all the boats in a Julio Jones-esque way, where I think that Higgins, okay, his targets might go down, but I think his efficiency can get a boost from having another alpha wide receiver on the field. So again, not as concerned with T. Higgins, but I'll trade Ayuk because I don't think enough people are considering the fact that if Trey Lance takes over quarterback, this team is going to pass like 20 times a game. And like, that's going to significantly impact Ayuk's fantasy stock. And that's not being considered as much as, Jamar Chase's impact on T. Higgins. So I'm going to take the trade with Ayuk, and then I'm going to cut T. Higgins because again, the targets are going to go down. And again, I'm not as down on him as most, but I mean, he did drop in my rankings when Jamar Chase got drafted. And we saw this last year with CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. Like if T. Higgins is the Michael Gallup of this offense, as many people are comparing the 2021 Bengals to the 2020 Dallas Cowboys, then you're not going to be thrilled about having him on your team. So I'll cut T. Higgins.
I agree with you on the trading Ayuk. I feel like he's a guy right now where his value is so overinflated because of what he did down the stretch. And, you know, recency bias is a hell of a drug in fantasy football. And a lot of people saw him do really well down the stretch. But when he was putting up those monster numbers, George Kittle wasn't there. Deebo Samuel wasn't there. You already talked about how Trey Lance, once he takes over, they're going to be throwing the ball less. So you're looking at less passing work. You got Deebo Samuel and George Kittle coming back into the fold. I think right now people are a little bit too high on Ayuk. So I agree with that. He's somebody that I'm actively trying to trade away in all of the leagues that I have in. Brendan, throw the same question to you. I'll throw it up here again in case you need to see it. Trade, keep, cut. Ayuk, Lamb, Higgins. What are you doing here?
Yeah, so I do kind of hate this question because it forces me to get rid of two of them. But I do agree with Andrew on the keep. I'm definitely keeping CeeDee Lamb because he is just in far and away the best offensive environment and, might be the best talent of the trio there. So, and I kind of think he's a player who's ascending. Amari Cooper, I have no reason necessarily to think he's going to fall off a cliff. Same with Michael Gallup and everything. But just as the younger player, I think that something gets overlooked game theory wise with fantasy football is you always want to be controlling the market. You want to have appreciating assets and not depreciating assets. So I do really like CeeDee Lamb in that sense. I think figuring out the 49ers is going to be one of the keys to like the 2021 just fantasy season in general, because I think they're going to be a good offense, but I just look at the team and on a player by player basis, I don't really love the values. Cause even like George Kittle, like I'm someone who's moved Waller ahead of Kittle in my tight end rankings. And then Brandon Ayuk, like you said, when Trey Lance does take over, I'm not positive how much they're going to be throwing, and there's still Deebo Samuel, and then we know that they want to run the ball, but who's the running back going to be? So there's so many questions with the team, but if someone can figure it out, I think that could give them a competitive advantage heading into the season. I'm going to cut Ayuk. I'm going to trade T. Higgins, and I think that I'm just choosing to trade him because I like T. Higgins a little bit more than Ayuk personally. I do worry about the Chase Boyd Higgins thing. The saving grace might be that those targets are so, like the Bengals passing game targets are so concentrated amongst those three that they're all able to, live a little bit. It might be a little volatile week to week, but it's not like they have a tight end who's going to demand a huge market share either.
Yeah, as excited as I am to see Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase paired back together, I hated what that did to T. Higgins. T. Higgins before the draft was a guy that, we were talking about best ball a little bit on this show, but I was getting T. Higgins in almost every single one of my drafts. And then, Jamar Chase just came in there and screwed it all up. And, that's a tough one to see exactly how that's going to shake out. It'll be interesting to see. I personally think that Tyler Boyd is going to kind of be the odd guy out, taking on that Michael Gallup role, but all three of them are very similar. So it's going to be tough to see. Now, this question, I think I kind of know the answer, but I want to throw it out there anyway, just because we just saw Justin Jefferson set the NFL rookie record for receiving with 1,400 yards. I mean, you can't set the bar much higher than that coming out as a rookie. So do you expect him to ever hit that number again, or do you think we saw Justin Jefferson just peak as a rookie? Brendan, start us off with this one.
Again, similar to Clyde for me, Jefferson was kind of one of like my guys last year. I traded for him in my big, most important league at the right time. And my dad owns a sports card and memorabilia store. We were opening like a box of football cards, and we pulled this like great Jefferson rookie auto. It was just like the timing of it was amazing. So I just fell in love with him. I think that Jefferson is like everything you want to see. Like now it's like, oh, what about Kirk Cousins? And the Vikings want to run the ball. And like those are, like more or less concerns. It's not like Jefferson's on a team as pass happy as the Chiefs or the Bills necessarily. But this is a player who, again, like you mentioned, set the rookie record. And he was a first round pick who was, very productive in college. And he immediately was extremely productive as a professional. So that is like exactly everything you want to see from a rookie receiver. And I think like the biggest argument against him might be he's not like a touchdown dominator. I hope he doesn't not set up for a career like Julio Jones in that sense, where it's like it did feel like in the red zone they were going to like Thielen and in the short area of the field a lot more. But again, like what I said before, like let's zoom out for a sec again, like Andrew says, and big picture view, like he checked all the boxes, good in college, first round pick, good right away, everything you want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing to add to that. I think he killed that response, Brendan. But what do you think, Andrew? Do you think that we saw a peak coming out of Justin Jefferson, or do you think that we still have the best is yet to come?
I think that he can improve his touchdown numbers. I think Adam Thielen led the NFL in end zone targets last year, like 25 end zone targets. So I think that Jefferson can definitely eat into that a little bit more. I would take the under on the receiving yard total, because I think that the Vikings defense is going to not be an absolute trash next year because, I mean, that was one of the biggest things I noticed about. I was really high on Thielen last year because I looked at this Vikings defense. I was like, people think this defense is going to be good because it's like the Vikings. And it's like, wait, they like don't have any of the same guys that they used to have. And they had opt-outs. They had, rookie cornerbacks starting every single week. Like, it was a mess. Mm-hmm. So their defense is going to be way better. I think that means they're going to, again, focus more on the run game. And I just don't think you're going to see as many huge yardage games. He's still going to be, a really good wide receiver. Again, this isn't, look, he was really good as a rookie. He was the best. So, like, we shouldn't be expecting him. Well, yeah, I know he's probably going to, I don't know about Jefferson. It's like, no, he's going to be good, like, probably for a long time. Like, this doesn't happen to just, this isn't a one-time thing. Like, he's a really good player. So he's going to continue to be a great fantasy option, I think. I'll just take the under on the 1,400 yards.
I mean, you don't typically see somebody just stumble into 1,400 yards. You've got to be a pretty good player to hit that. So, I mean, a lot of people right now are saying that, he's at his peak value, but I mean, we might be seeing the next generational talent come in. Like, he could really just be that good that we're just going to see him get better and better. So we already talked about the Cowboys and Bengals a little bit, and their crowded trio of receivers there. But there's another one with the second-year guy, Chase Claypool in Pittsburgh. He had maybe not a consistent rookie season, but he showed some flashes of absolute dominance last year. So with Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster in that pass-catching room, where do you see that kind of working out as far as targets, fantasy points? Andrew, start us off here. What's happening in Pittsburgh, and how does Chase Claypool fit in the fold?
I did a huge deep dive on these three dudes after Juju Smith-Schuster ruined everything and came back to Pittsburgh. And the conclusion I came to was it's really tight between the three guys, but I still settled with Deontay just because of the target volume he got. And basically, in all the games that he was healthy, he was second in expected fantasy points per game. So all the opportunity was there for him, and Ben loves throwing on the ball. And he's just a good player. Like he was a really good prospect coming in. He had the punt returner ability. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Antonio Brown, but like he reminds me a lot of Antonio Brown. Like, had the style of way that he plays, and like the drops, whatever, it doesn't matter. You got to get open to drop the ball. So I prefer. I would be, as a Patriots fan, that's where I'm from. I would love it if N'Keal Harry dropped more passes. Would I love it? But the guy can't get open, so thus he doesn't drop any balls. So Deontay's number one, and then Chase Claypool's two, because the targets are, again, it's kind of split between him and Smith-Schuster, but he just gets the high value touches. Like, he's targeted downfield. And say we want about Big Ben's arm. Okay, it sucks, whatever. Dude, Chase Claypool still led the NFL in deep targets last year with 42, finished fifth in total air yards. So does he have to get twice as many deep targets to catch half of them because Big Ben doesn't have a good arm? Yes, but he's still getting a lot of deep targets. So again, they're not super accurate, but you need to get them. And that's what he got last year. So, I mean, look, I always go back to, if he smells like alpha, looks like alpha, probably is an alpha. Like don't try to overthink it. Like, Claypool is a beast, and Smith-Schuster comes in last because look, like his ADOT's not going to be as low as it was last year, 6.8, but like I just haven't seen the juice from this guy. Like, the guy that was super explosive after the catch, like ever since Antonio Brown left, like if he's like a more vocal point of the offense, like defense is just focusing on him, and he has yet to deliver, 2 seasons in a row. Again, you could throw out the year without Big Ben, but last year, he had a ton of opportunity. Like, he was getting targeted a ton, and he just wasn't really making that many plays. So I guess I'm lowest on Smith-Schuster just because of the lack of upside of his targets. I know they're talking about moving him outside. It's like, so that means that's not good because he hasn't been making a lot of plays from the outside. Like, he's always been a slot guy. So that's not really, I'm not thrilled by that type of aspect. At least in the slot, we knew he was going to get a ton of targets. Like, we knew he was locked in, but now if he's moving more to the outside, I'm more concerned.
Yeah, that'll definitely lower his upside. And you got to be careful, man. I know you said that you're new to TikTok. The TikTok, that might be, will suck the juice out of Juju Smith-Schuster. So, just don't get too deep into the TikTok rabbit hole. I don't want you to lose your juice too. But please, actually, you come out with so much content, Andrew, that I can't even keep up with it. So I missed out on that. But please send that deep dive to me, because this situation, these three guys in Pittsburgh, is one of the most intriguing scenarios in the NFL. So send that to me, because I would love to see your deep dive opinion on that. But Brendan, same question over to you. Where do you see these guys kind of shaking out? Andrew just said it's Deontay, Chase, and Juju for him. Are you thinking the same, or is it a little bit different for you?
Yep, I love Andrew's thought process on drops because, again, we talk about a lot of sometimes like the type of people who might be out on Clyde Edwards-Helaire in a redraft league are the same people who would complain about Deontay's drops. Oh, Deontay sucks. I don't want him. I'm fully agree with that very objective viewpoint on it. And Chase Claypool, it is hilarious to go back before the draft. There was a lot of people who wanted him to move to tight end because they didn't think he could be a wide receiver. I do like obviously Juju's return. Like I would again, it's a good what if. I kind of sometimes like thinking about these what ifs. Like what if Juju had taken that offer from the Ravens or the Chiefs that he was reported to have been given? Like how would we be viewing both Deontay and Claypool? Then and. The biggest thing that I like about Claypool is they do kind of not only does he get the money touches, but they manufactured some goal line both targets and touches, like literal handoffs for him, which I do like. Now, from a big picture standpoint, I am a tiny bit gun shy on the Steelers. It just has the makings of the bottom could fall out if Ben just doesn't have it anymore. If he has one of those Peyton Manning final years and, the O-line still sucks. Like I do think there is bottom out potential. So I don't want to be overly invested in the Steelers, but I do in terms of the player analysis and getting, the touches that are most valuable for fantasy, then yeah, Claypool checks those boxes. So would like some shares, but again, I am a little gun shy and going overboard with the Steelers this season.
Well, the good news is that if Big Ben's arm does fall off and he's not the same player, they can always pivot to Dwayne Haskins. So, they've got a great backup plan over there in Pittsburgh. But last question here. And first of all, you guys have been fantastic guests. Like both of you are just crushing this. I'm so happy that we got to do this one today. But last question. And we're going to talk about two players on this one. Laviska Shenault and Jerry Jeudy. Those were both guys that got a ton of hype coming into the rookie season. And I think it's safe to say that both of those guys fell a little bit short of what was expected of them. So, Brendan, I'll start with you here. But Jerry Jeudy and Laviska Shenault, are you in or are you out on either of them heading into 2021?
So I think the way that I'd play, and it's so funny, we've talked about all these, amazing rookies this year. And I remember as we're working the news desk for Fantasy Pros, we're doing it, the draft that night. And going in, like Jerry Jeudy was thought to be like the biggest blue chip prospect of them all. And we now it's a year later, we're doing the show and we don't even get to him to the very end. So to me, that's a statement of how, sad things have gotten offensively in terms of the Broncos. Now, if Drew Lock is going to be their quarterback week one, I can't get excited about him. If they pull off the trade for Aaron Rodgers, we'll see. Then, that obviously really changes a lot. To me right now, because of the poor offensive environment and because, we still like Judy's talent because of those pre-draft evaluations, that he in Dynasty is just, like one of my biggest, quote unquote buy lows right now. Jerry Jeudy, that is. So, but as long as Drew Lock is the quarterback, in redraft, this isn't an offense that I want to invest in. And again, kind of similar with Shenault. He's, again, not someone that jumps out to me. A lot of reasons to be excited about the talent of what the Jaguars could do with him if they used him in the ways that a lot of us want to. But, DJ Chark's still there. Marvin Jones is there now. It's a rookie quarterback. I'm not sold yet on Urban Meyer being the sharpest, coach and the NFL, and then the whole ETN wide receiver thing. It'd be a lot for him to overcome to be a weekly wide receiver 1 or 2. I think.
Agree with both of those takes. So Andrew, same question to you, and then we'll wrap up here. Jerry Jeudy, Laviska Shenault, who are you in on and who are you out on for 2021?
So I have a Laviska Shenault share in a dynasty league, and I've been trying to figure out a way to package something together to go get Jerry Jeudy. So
that tells me everything I need to know how you feel about
that.
That
kind of tells you how I feel about these two players. So yeah, I'm definitely on the Jeudy side. When you just kind of look at Judy's whole season, basically the guy did everything we want a player to do, like get a ton of opportunities, get open, make big plays, show off speed. He just didn't score fantasy points. Like that was like the biggest thing he just didn't do. But we have just gotten so much sharper with looking at players and realizing, no, like he got everything we want. He just didn't put up the points. But if he just gets all those opportunities again, like we know he's a good player, and chances of him getting all those same opportunities again and not producing like is very unlikely, at least in my estimation of the situation. And look, I don't think Drew Lock is going to be the guy there in terms of the starting quarterback. I do think that it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater that starts, because I think that Denver is in the market of winning games. Like Teddy Bridgewater is going to help the team win more games because he's just a more accurate passer. He's a better game manager. He just understands the game a little bit more from Locke, who's just like, all right, well, double coverage, don't care. Like, let's do it. It's like, dude, like we're trying to win this game. It's like, nah, man, for the TikTok, like, let's go. So I think Teddy Bridgewater last year was third in adjusted completion percentage. Like he can get the ball to his playmakers. We saw him support 3 top 25 receivers: Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. I mean, Robbie Anderson had a renaissance with Teddy Bridgewater, and people are talking up Robbie Anderson like it's a good thing that he has Sam Darnold again. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, dude,
he just had a top 20 season.
Like, exactly. Like his target rate went up like 40% on his routes run with Teddy Bridgewater versus Sam Darnold from 2019 to 2020. So blows my mind how people are excited about, okay, because we've seen plenty of these running back or wide receiver quarterback, old pairings where I'm sure Robbie wasn't thrilled to get Sam Darnold back. He's like, wait, what? We're getting rid of Teddy B, the guy that would target me with like a 27% target share, which is like top 5 in the league last year. It's like, okay. But I think that we could see more of that from a Jerry Jeudy type player. I think that Jerry Jeudy also was tasked with running a lot of more downfield routes. Not to say that's not his strength or anything, but he did play in the slot a lot at Alabama. So I think they could probably move him a little bit more inside with Cortland Sutton really operating as that downfield threat. I think that working alongside another alpha receiver, I mean, that's what Jerry Jeudy basically did at Alabama, was working with other alphas. So I think that he's a super buy. And Teddy Bridgewater, again, look, 2019, it was Curtis Samuel. He was the air yards king, but like did no production, but it was on tape that this guy is good. And what happened in 2020? He got Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterback. What do you know? Curtis Samuel is good. 2021, fast forward, Teddy Bridgewater with Jerry Jeudy. What do you know? Jerry Judy's good. So that's my take on Jeudy. Chenault, I guess I'll hit on real quickly. Look, there's obviously a lot of concerns with the way that they're operating things in Jacksonville. Like Urban Meyer, there's just a lot of questionable moves he's making. And look, the most buzz I'm hearing about Jacksonville camp right now from a second-year receiver is freaking Colin Johnson. Like that's what I'm hearing, and that's not good if you're in on Chenault. And I've lowered him a little bit in the rankings just because I felt less comfortable about the situation. And yeah, long term, I would just really rather have Jeudy. I wouldn't say I'm out on Chenault, but I'm much less bullish on him than before. I mean, there's opportunities in that offense, but there's really no telling how Urban Meyer is going to distribute his players. Like, I think the preseason will tell us a lot about what Jacksonville's kind of planning on doing. And it wouldn't really surprise me at all if like we see Laviska Shenault like not out with the starters and we're like, oh no, like what's happening? Like why is Colin Johnson starting on the outside? It's like, what's going on? So yeah, Jacksonville, you got to keep up to date with the news. It's gonna be a wild summer with Tebow. Oh man, I'm looking forward to getting the Fantasy Bros news updates, guys. So get on that.
You see the one today that they're talking about moving Tebow in for some Taysom Hill type packages at
quarterback? Oh no.
Yes. It's going to be a disaster. I'm getting very, very heavy Chip Kelly in Philadelphia vibes right now. And I don't know if it's going to work out for him in Jacksonville. But seriously, I cannot thank you guys enough for coming on the show. I mean, this, as far as like just a pure knowledge standpoint, you guys came prepared and just crushed every single question. I've never gone over an hour on the show. Show typically lasts 40 to 55 minutes, but you guys were dropping so much knowledge that I just couldn't stop. So seriously, cannot thank you guys enough for being fantastic guests. Before we sign off, one last time to plug where you can be found on Twitter or TikTok or wherever you want them to find you. Brendan, why don't you let everyone know where you're at?
Yes, sir. So Brendan Tuma, it's on Twitter at Too Much Tuma. My work can be found on Fantasy Pros, a lot of MLB right now, and it will be shifting to a lot of NFL as the summer goes on.
Andrew, take us home.
You can find all my written content over on pff.com, doing a best ball draft kit. Tons of fun, a lot of good best ball content. So make sure you go check that out. I'm on Twitter at Erickson _. I still don't know what my TikTok username is, but that's okay. On Instagram, also at Erickson _. But yeah, love talking ball. And this was a lot of fun, Dave. Really appreciate you having me on.
Dave, thank you for this.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone that tuned in to episode 5 of the Launchpad. I just love the idea of getting some new people on the show every single week, expanding their reach and breaking into new audiences. And that's what I'm hoping to provide every single week. I'm going to be gone next week at a wedding, but I will be back the following week Well, traveling actually in San Diego, and I will be with Josh Larkey and Kev. You might know him better as Roto Surgeon. So I will see you guys in 2 weeks. But thanks a lot, and we will see you soon.